Welcome to this podcast. I'm David Ammons with Retirement Living Associates. We're another episode of our podcast, which is a joint effort between Retirement Living Associates and Retirement Resource Guide. Today we have a very exciting guest, Tom Akins, who's the president and CEO of Leading Age, North Carolina. So Tom, I appreciate you joining me today.
Sure.
And we have a few topics we want to touch on. So thank you for your time. Anything you'd like to open with? Or?
Sure. It's always good to be with you.
Thank you.
And learn from what you and your different communities are doing in terms of trying to lead the way for where we go as retirement communities in this state. As you know, this is an exciting time to be in North Carolina at a retirement community.
Mm-hmm.
So.
It is that. So the main topic we want to focus on today is residents. And we could all write books and tell stories and have a good time with all that. But our goal is to talk more about structures and input and where all that comes from. So one thing I know you're involved with and interact with is the Association of Residents who live in our communities. So help me with exactly what that name is and the acronym.
Right. So NORCRA, which is the North Carolina Continuing Care Residents Association, is an organization in North Carolina that is whose mission is really to provide support to and information to and advocate on behalf of residents at communities, which can be a tricky proposition sometimes, right?
Yes.
And over the years, and I think this is to NORCRA's credit and Leading Age North Carolina's, to be frank, that we have worked on that being less of an adversarial kind of relationship. As you know, at times that has been kind of a us versus management, or us versus the folks who are just here to make rules and make life tough. And I think that NORCRA has done a really good job recently in terms of coming at this from a more collaborative kind of approach, which is helpful for everybody.
Good. And how big is NORCRA now at this point?
So NORCRA's got about 5,000 members, which is, when you figure that their universe is about 25,000 members.
Yeah, they're 20%.
Help me with my math here,
20%.
but that's about 20% of the market that they've got. And so they do an annual meeting with educational topics. Many communities in North Carolina have a NORCRA chapter that's there, and they work with the leadership at their community on making that a more positive experience for folks.
Well, and I'm intrigued because if they have representation at all the communities or most all the communities, I would think that's a very positive goal. Having all the residents join is not a lot more impactful, I guess, than having representatives from every community. So that's great. What kinds of things do they work on? Are you involved with that, or do you know kind of what their focuses are?
Yeah. For the past couple of years, that main focus has been on the revision of the state CCRC statute. They've had 5 residents that have served on a 20-member statewide task force.
Wow.
And they have been really helpful in terms of providing that perspective. At the end of the day, that statute revision really has been about trying to make sure that the rules and regulations that impact CCRCs in this state are good for consumers, they're good for residents, they're good for folks who are thinking about living in a community in North Carolina, whether they live here now or they're coming from another state, really has allowed that task force to take advantage of the expertise and the perspective they have.
Well, they have a big challenge. I will tell you something that you've probably heard that we, amongst the industry, say regularly, because it's 100% true, which is if you've seen one continuing care retirement community, then, well, you've seen one continuing care retirement community.
That's right.
Because the diversity and the differences are night and day. In fact, I often use the analogy or the reference to universities, that there's no way you can say this University A and University B are the exact same.
Right.
And so I think that when people first start looking at a retirement community and thinking about what to do, they certainly get input from their friends, but then they are faced with which one felt right and did right. So I don't know that I have a question in that for you, but I'd welcome your thoughts on if I'm management or the leadership of that residents association, NORCA, then how they're combining the priorities that some people bring based on where they live, because I think some communities are very different than others as far as resident input and involvement and everything. So
in North Carolina, you've got communities that span, in just from a time perspective, Whitestone over in Greensboro, which has been around since 1898.
Wow.
All the way up to Trinity Landing and Wilmington, which just opened its doors, and then all of these communities in between that continue to renovate and reposition and make their facilities better. My context on this is shaped by working in the field, but it's also, I've got a 97-year-old mother that lives in a CCRC. And I know that when she and Dad were looking at a place to live, what made the decision, she was ready to go way before he was.
Right.
But for my dad, what made the difference was they went to dinner with some folks they went to church with who lived at the retirement community. And they went over and they had dinner with them and they played bridge. They went home and Dad said, I think I can live there. And it was because they didn't just do the marketing tour, right? But they had some friends there. They came back at different kinds of things. And you're exactly right, David. It's all about, does this feel
there's a fit.
right to me? There's
That's
a fit. I was just at a community in over in Greenville, and they were doing a meeting for prospective residents. And they had as many current residents as they did prospective residents so that they could give them perspective on what that was like. And so that involvement of residents in the, whether you want to call it the marketing process or whatever it is, it's just really important.
It is, and I will tell you, from a management point of view, it's hard because sometimes a person who wants to volunteer and wants to help you a whole lot with your marketing is not like your prospects. And so you're doing some matching up, and I've always tried to be extremely lenient and open to all the diversity, but it can be a challenge. If you have your 97-year-old mom meeting with a recently retired 65-year-old couple is a different generation. Literally is a different generation. In fact, we joke. I've been in some legislative kinds of things or interviews, and they'll say, do you think it's good to have a continuing care retirement community within a multi-generation development? And I said, well, remember, our communities are multi-generation because I'm amazed how often they are. So
yeah, absolutely. And just real quickly, another part of that challenge is for current residents that want to tour prospective residents and have conversations.
Right.
That sometimes you will have a current resident in their zeal and their enthusiasm about a community that will relate things in ways that are perhaps not completely accurate. Happens to all of us.
Right.
And so we just really encourage prospective residents when they're visiting a community to ask as many questions as they can, not only of current residents, but of the folks who work there so that they get the answer. You probably know this. I mean, when you go to a retirement community, you're going to sign a contract. You better read that whole contract because when you put your signature on that dotted line, you're bound by those things. So when you go, just ask lots of questions.
That's right. Ask and ask. And I'll say, in some marketing consulting work that I've done or sales training, I always enjoy talking to someone who has done college tours with their child, because I'm amazed. I've been to universities with my children that I knew were great. I thought they would be a good fit. And the student tour guide was just completely different than some of the tour, And so you have bad experiences and you think, this university needs to know how bad that went because of that personality, not all that goes into the university. So it's same with our communities. We work so hard to have all the aspects of the community, and then which ones get highlighted can taint it the wrong way. One thing I'd love for you to speak to, I find more and more we management are open to resident input, resident involvement. I'll go ahead and head our conversation a little bit with, we have always been, and I try to be extremely open to input and not open to we're going to vote and you have decision authority, but lots of input. And the truth is, if you give a lot of input, you're going to end up doing what they want. There's not really a feud at the end of that, I have found. Whereas some of my, some of the people I knew earlier in the industry, some of them have retired, whatnot, really believed in a separation, that we can't let I won't say inmates run the the prison, but that kind of thing. So what do you see when you visit other places and communities and executive directors, et cetera?
Yeah, I think over time we have seen more transparency, whether it's around financials, whether it is around specific resident committees that might meet on a semi-annual or quarterly basis with management to talk about financials, to talk about future plans, not from the standpoint of, okay, when we finish this meeting, we're going to take a vote about what it is that we're going to do.
Right.
CCRC is not a homeowners association.
That's right.
And that's what I'm used to. We just put gravel down in the back alley of all our places because we took a vote and decided how we were going to spend that money.
Right.
Because it was still, in some ways, our money. When you move to a CCRC, certainly you deserve information and transparency, and you deserve a say in the way things unfold. But at the end of the day, that is and ought to be a management kind of responsibility to make that decision.
Well, and I think most residents, the vast majority, appreciate that while I'd like to have input, there's some residents here, I hope you're not letting them make all the decisions. So there's a little bit of self-preservation in that, right? To understanding human nature. So
Right.
along those
And
lines.
there are some folks that come to a retirement community and they are not necessarily interested in making decisions anymore.
That's right.
They've got a whole host of other kinds of things that they're doing at that community and in the larger community, and they're just as happy having somebody else make those
Let's talk 1 minute, speaking of coming to the retirement community, about some of the nuances and new regulations on continuing care retirement community, but stay home.
Right.
So some of them call it at home, some call it without lodging. Speak to that a little bit, because I think that's an interesting thing too, that you'll have continuing care community residents, members of this community, but they still live in their house. Right. And so you really get into where's input there or not, and et cetera. So.
Yeah. So I think the statute revision work that's been done, that's been proposed, is going to tighten up some of that in terms of ensuring that, and I think this is a big concern, for a resident who lives at a CCRC and says, wait a minute, I invested my money in this CCRC, and now you're doing something with folks who don't even live here, who maybe don't have an entrance fee. And we can talk all day about why I think continuing care without lodging is a good thing for a CCRC. But I think with the statute revision, there are some things in there that have tightened that up so that there's more accountability for how that's going to work. North Carolina's without lodging statute has been around for about 14 years now.
Wow.
There are, we've got more than 30 states now that have statutes on the books, and that it's a business model that it's like the whole, if you've seen one CCRC, you've seen one CCRC.
That's
it's
right.
the same way with that continuing care without lodging. If you've seen one program, you've seen one program, but it can be a good thing for a community in terms of being able to provide their expertise to folks who either aren't ready to move yet or they're not going to move, but a way for them to provide their expertise to others, while at the same time, if I'm getting some services through a continuing care without lodging, I may be over on that campus
Little
by little and decide this is where I want to live.
But most of them, you find the program is geared towards, I have the protection, security of long-term care when I need that, or if I need that, or some people would say, heaven forbid if I need that. But
it's like for if I were, and I'm getting closer, 63 and a half, I'm not ready to move from my home with all my memories of my children and that tree that I planted that's now huge, and my neighbors, right?
Magnolia.
But I do know that at some point I may need some care, and I want some assurance around how that might happen. And so continuing care without lodging programs are fabulous for providing folks in a larger community with that assurance in a way that's financially good for providers.
Good. I'm glad to discuss it a little bit. I'm just going to put a positive image on it, but it's always had a positive image. I just find that it's mentioned a lot more lately than it used to be, and some of that's probably the demographics involved and whatnot. So, well, thank you for your time. I think we've covered a wide range. I hope that the viewers of my podcast are people that are thinking about a retirement community, whether for them or their parents or aunt or uncle and that type of thing. And so always trying to shed some light on the pieces and how it comes together is what we're aiming to do.
Good,
So,
good.
Thank you, Tom. Good to see you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.